welcome to tonight's virtual event with a number of co-hosts. I'm Daniel Goldin, proprietor of Boswell Book Company. It is day 4,274 of us being in business. We are so honored to be part of this event tonight with Erin Brockovich, the author of Superman's Not Coming. And we have some wonderful co-hosts for this event. And I would like to introduce first Rebecca Klaper, professor and director of the Great Lakes Genomics Center, to say a few words. Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. I am at the School of Freshwater Sciences, the first freshwater school in the country, and it's at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, here in Milwaukee. We have a professional science master's program that is really fantastic and has a 98% placement rate of its graduates into all sorts of water sectors, from policy positions to government to research positions to technology to everything. And we have a new undergraduate program that's starting this next fall, and we have our application process is open right now. So 2021, we have a new undergraduate program. And students in our program learn everything from science of freshwater to technology solutions to policy solutions for our freshwater problems. Our faculty have expertise in Great Lakes science, which is near and dear to folks' heart around this area, but also in aquaculture and in microbial contamination and toxicology, which is my area, my own lab studies, the presence and impacts of emerging contaminants such as pharmaceuticals and PFAS and nanomaterials and solutions to potential water contamination issues. So I was so excited to be invited to be one of the co-hosts on behalf of the School of Freshwater Science for the topic tonight, and these fantastic speakers, Erin Brockovich and of course her co-host Suzanne, who've put forth this great book talking about how everyone should be involved and learn and advocate about freshwater resources. And also Mary Burke, who's been obviously very involved with politics in Wisconsin and now is really a force for advocacy for women and advancing women in all fields, which is so necessary in scientific fields and also in our water protection fields. And so thank you allowing for me and School of Freshwater Sciences to support and take part in this particular event. And I hope that folks will check us out at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee webpage. And with that, I'll hand it over to the fantastic Ann O'Meara to introduce herself also from UWM.
Thank you, Rebecca. On behalf of UWM School of Continuing Education and the Women Leaders Conference, I wanted to welcome everybody to this special event. So at UWM School of Continuing Education, we provide classes, seminars, certificates, and conferences for people of all ages. You don't have to be enrolled at UWM as a degree-seeking student. So we invite you to celebrate the new year in 2021 by learning something new with us. You can visit our website to see hundreds of opportunities for every stage of life. And we are also very honored to be part of this event with Erin Brockovich and Mary Burke, both of whom have presented at our Women Leaders Conference in the past. Last summer, we made a difficult decision to pause our in-person Women Leaders Conference for 2021. But we are excited to share a new initiative with you. In January, we will debut our new online community for women leaders in conjunction with Mary Burke and Building Brave. So we're very happy to have both Mary and Erin and Suzanne, the co-author of the book, with us today. And thank you, Daniel, for inviting us as School of Continuing Education to be co-sponsors tonight. I will turn it back to you to introduce our special guests.
Oh, thank you, Ann, who is the Director of Business and Technology Programs at the School of Continuing Education and a very, very special friend of Boswell as well. So we are honored to be part of this thing. So, and now the main event. Let me introduce tonight's panelists. Erin Brockovich is the president of Brockovich Research and Consulting and the founder of Erin Brockovich Foundation, a nonprofit organization created to educate and empower communities in their fight for clean water. She's the co-author of Take It From Me, Life's a Struggle, But You Can Win, and her own podcast show on Podcast One. Her new book is called, as you know, Superman's Not Coming, Our National Water Crisis. and what we, the people, can do about it. The co-writer of that book is also joining us tonight, Suzanne Boothby, who's also the author of The After Cancer Diet. She's a journalist who writes about health, politics, food, and eco-conscious stories, and a graduate of Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism. And doing in conversation tonight is Mary Burke, the CEO and founder of Building Brave. She earned a master's in business administration from Georgetown, and a bachelor's in Georgetown and a master's from Harvard Business School, and attended the London School of Economics. She draws on lessons learned from the gubernatorial race, including business experience gained at McKinsey Company and Trek Bicycle Company Corporation as head of European operations, to drive Building Brave success. And if you want to know more about all these wonderful things that we've told you about, don't worry, because at the end of the event, you'll be sent to a page with links where you can learn more and also sign up for the Building Brave community. So that said, enough from me. Please welcome our wonderful panelists. Thank you all. What an honor. Thank you.
Daniel, thanks so much. It is really my pleasure to be here. Erin and Suzanne, this is certainly a highlight of mine to end a really challenging year. And I was going to obviously ask you about the book. That's the main reason that we're here, and it's exciting to talk about the challenges that we're facing every single day and something that we take for granted, like water. And Erin, people are interested in your personal journey. I mean, it's, I put out on the Building Brave community and asked our members to share questions of what I should ask you. And we're not going to get to all of them, but they're really, really good. And people are so inspired and motivated by your story. So I'd love to talk a little bit about that as well. I'm not going to ask you why we should care about clean water, because on the CNN website just this morning, I read that each year in the United States, there are 7 million waterborne illnesses that affect Americans every year. 118,000 people each year end up in the hospital from waterborne illnesses, and there's over 6,600 deaths. So a serious issue, and something that you've really dedicated your life to. So tell me more about the book and why this came to be.
Well, hi, Mary. It's nice to see you, and really a pleasure to be here. And you know, I think the first thing that I have to say to everybody, and thank you for being here, is water is never a sound bite. It's always a story. So sometimes my answers aren't just pretty quick, but it's a story. And sometimes it's difficult to know where to begin with that story, because oftentimes you don't even know what you're in until you're out of it and you can look back. But for me, and the book, Superman's Not Coming, it is about a fight for clean water. But what I've been able to learn and really voice is that fight has truly been a fight for myself as well. We are water, and we can't exist without it. And that was made known to me very early on in my life. I was born and raised in Lawrence, Kansas, and I loved the outdoors. I grew up in the wheat fields and on dairy farms and running through the creeks and catching fireflies and lightning and thunderstorms. And I always felt very connected, understood in the environment, because I didn't always feel very connected in the rest of my life because I'm a dyslexic. And it was very hard for me in school. So I knew that I knew, and I worked from a real deep, guttural, common sense set of skills that always served me well in the environment. And my dad, who was an engineer, would always sing me songs as a little girl. Enjoy the water trickling down the stream, for You see it today, but tomorrow it might not be seen. And it was very subliminal. And here we are today, and we're going to embark on a conversation about water. And to your point, Mary, about CNN today and how many waterborne diseases there are that we're unaware of, that A, we don't talk about, or B, we're afraid to hear it and we don't want to recognize it, or C, that we don't believe enough in ourselves that we too can be a part of fixing something. And so as a dyslexic, I learned very early on, I did not like being put in a box. Nobody does. I didn't like the judgment, the label, the perception. Because I was different, I was placed over here. And I had a great dad that taught me about water and is an engineer and, you know, how so many things worked. And my mom, who was a journalist and a school teacher and a sociology major. And she knew the very essence of myself would go on. But if that was in jeopardy, I'd pull away. So she was always my cheerleader. And she taught me the value of a word called stick-to-itiveness. I've never forgotten it. I've applied it my whole life. She was right. Life's going to require you have stick-to-itiveness. And its definition is propensity to follow through in a determined manner. Dogged persistence, born of obligation and stubbornness. I'm like, oh, see, now that I get. You're talking to me in my language. I'm dogged, I'm determined, and stubborn is my middle name. And the environment and the recognition of I am water, we are water, and connected to it. And my mom giving me that hope that it was okay to be different really got me through life. And what really kind of stuck out for me was when I began my work in Hinckley, I realized that I wasn't alone. The same thing was happening to them, whether they were being judged or labeled or in some ways oppressed because something was wrong. Somebody didn't want to get caught. So what better way than to push back on them? And they felt different and inferior, but they were in Hinckley because they connected to that environment. So for me, at that moment, the perfect storm began to brew. In a nutshell, that gives you a little bit about me and my upbringing and where actually some of my fight comes from. One, being a dyslexic and often labeled and judged. And I tend to be a little bit of a fighter. And again, that really deep set of skills of observation and common sense. So when I was in Hinckley and somebody wanted to tell me that the two-headed frog and the green water was normal, I was like, yeah, no, I don't think I'm going to go with that. And I've really learned that what I see, what I experience, I own. And I know it. And I oftentimes won't let somebody knock me off of that because they're questioning me when I know what I see. And I saw that happening in the community in Hinckley, which, by the way, I see everywhere in communities. Oftentimes as moms, they know what they see and they're going to stick with this and they're going to find out what goes on and they're going to fight. And when you fight for water, you're fighting for yourself, you're fighting for your family, and you're fighting for the future of your family's health.
So, Erin, I got the question from some people who they put you in a different bucket. Oh, Erin Brockovich can do that. She's fearless. She has all that courage. And you talk about the stick-to-it-ness. I didn't pronounce that right, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
What do you say to the people who don't see themselves as a fighter? And have you come across those in the work, the advocacy, and the fight? How does someone develop that?
I do see that, and I've seen it in my own family, and I've actually had to work with that inside my own self. When I was outside of Hinckley or in a courtroom or talking with a scientist, I'd find myself, I can't do this, I'm not that. And I really wanted to make it some of my life's work to understand myself. And I learned that if I don't, I stand in my own way, and then I won't ever really be able to achieve that hope or wish or desire or dream that I know I could get to. And so I do teach people in my own work and in my communities, it's fear. And what has happened, you almost have to have a really good degree in psychology in some ways when you come in. And when you're working in the environment, you have to understand people's emotions, their fear, they've been lied to, they don't trust. And we have that conversation with ourselves, and yet we never get in behind ourselves or even have that conversation. We define ourselves by what others think of us. Well, no, wait a minute. We're going to define ourselves how we see ourselves. And I will have these conversations with community members, and they're afraid. And I've learned that that fear that you have, that you're going to be the silly one raising your hand and everyone's going to make fun of you, who cares? You've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. Nobody's perfect. We all fail. Own failures. They are your best route to success. Own that fear. And when you do, it's a little easier to step out there. You don't have all this conversation going on in your head that you can't do that, and have a conversation that, while I'm afraid, I can do this. And most of my life, I was afraid because I was a dyslexic. But I have learned that my fears, my vulnerabilities, my flaws are my greatest gifts. And I'm not going to be afraid to show that to anyone. And if they can find that inside themselves, I will tell you, and it's in the book, over and over and over again. When they find themselves, when they can hear their own voice and not that of who somebody else thinks they need to be, every single time they step out and they do it.
So Erin, right before we started this, you and I were talking, and you said something about pissed off moms. And I loved the line, I love the story. Can you tell a little bit more about the role pissed off moms have played in your journey and what you've accomplished?
They're the best. So everybody who's a mom, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We all had a mom. My mom had eyes in the back of her head. That woman knew things, and she taught me about stick-to-itiveness because she had stick-to-itiveness and that follow-through and that determination. When I'm in communities, every single time, it will be a mom that gets set off because A, you've lied to her. B, you've lied to her and she may have a sick family member. And so she's tired of being afraid, or she's being tired of being told what you see and what you're experiencing within your own family couldn't possibly be happening. Do you know how many times I've been called crazy? They're like, really, Erin? There's two-headed frogs in green water? I doubt it. I heard the mothers in Hinckley. You're hysterical. But I'll tell you, they have keen instincts. And when they're onto it, and in the communities I've worked with, and we may or may not get there tonight, but it's in the book, The Moms of Hannibal. Everybody saw what happened in Flint, Michigan. Those were moms that stood up. Hinckley, California, the first person I worked with, Roberta Walker, mom, she wasn't having it. They're everywhere. And here's the thing, when they join forces, I'm telling you, I've seen 50,000 pissed off moms. You just stand down because they're going to come through. And here's what's amazing about them. They really don't mind if it takes 1 year, 4 years, or 8 years. They're going to find out what's going on and they will get there. So I call them pissed off moms. And everywhere I go, I'm like, yes. The moment it happens, I'm like, yes. And they rise. They're amazing. Moms are amazing.
And so do you think sometimes the role that you play in the work that you do is giving people permission? Do you feel, and this is a question I get from women who feel that sometimes they're waiting to be given permission to do that. And has that been something in your own life where you face that? And do you see it in the work that you do? And what would you say to other women about that?
Yes, and it's an excellent question. And Suzanne and I have talked extensively about permission from the perspective of everyone emailing me. And, you know, I'm not Superwoman and I can't be everywhere. And it's like, really, what is it you're asking? Are you looking for permission or some validation because you're uncertain yourself? You don't want to be that first one to step out there.
Yeah.
Because if you're writing me for that permission, I'm going to give it to you. But what they're really looking for is support. Support from a family or a community member to get behind them. Now, if we want to even go deeper into that and what I've learned over the course of my career, what you're really looking is for the support from yourself and that confidence in yourself to say, I can do this and I've got that. We're always looking for a hero, and you really have to look no further for that hero or that support other than you, straight down that mirror. And we forget that all the time. We're so busy looking for someone to support us and someone to tell us it's okay. You know the situation you're in. You've got to own what you feel, what you're experiencing, what you're thinking, what you're seeing, and get behind it. And that is that rooted in moment where the pissed off moms show up and they are rooted down, they're staying in it, and they're not going to let something else convince them. And see, that's that moment when they take off. They weren't waiting for permission. They did need support. They got some. And through that, they really learned, I got to support and get behind myself. So Suzanne and I do talk about that a lot.
And I'll say too, just to give a different perspective, because, you know, Erin can only talk so much about herself, but you know, she was the most unlikely candidate to do what she did. You know, she was a single mom. She had small kids. She was not high up in her law firm. She was, you know, just sort of trying to do her job and noticed, hey, what's going on? Why are there health records in a real estate case? This doesn't make any sense. She used her common sense. And, you know, from that, and again, being a mom, right? Going out, meeting Roberta, another mom, seeing that her kids were having troubles, seeing other kids in the community, that was enough to sort of rise up and start to make some noise and start to talk to other people in the community, rally with scientists, get more information, right? I think that's what people love about Erin and her story, is that she wasn't like top of the hill. She was just sort of an everyday person, and we all have that ability. And I saw somebody asking in the chat, you know, is she like the movie? She's like it and more. She's she's fiery as ever, and she, you know, when she's on the case of something, you know, she'll be yelling at me for 2 hours, and I'm like, I know.
I'm not yelling. I'm just expressing my passion.
Exactly.
And now I'm a pissed off grandma, so.
Right.
Oh, Erin, what tips would you offer younger women coming up? Maybe they haven't found their passion. Maybe they're not yet a pissed off mom, but they're passionate and they want to do great things in the world, but they haven't found that passion. How does that happen? What words of advice would you give them?
Well, it's a journey. If you're talking to the girl that was born and raised in Kansas, okay? And to my point with dyslexia, if I'd ever said that I envision I will hunt down a toxic chemical, hexavalent chromium, and they're going to make a film about it, and Julia Roberts will play it. See, I would have got, you are crazy. You know, never be afraid to dream, and don't let the voice of others sink you. And that is what's so key. And it's hard for girls and sciences, or they think that they can't, or they're told they shouldn't. And so all those things I see as like these negative ions that stick on me. And I want to be positive, and how you throw that off of you. And I talk about RAM, which is realize, assess, and motivate. oneself. We as women and even young girls are wanting to motivate others, or, you know, certainly our parents to be proud of us, or maybe we're married and our husband to be proud of us. And we're always searching for that, and we're the caretakers, but to be able to turn it inward. And here's the thing that I think happens with young girls, and what I want to say to you, please don't be afraid to be who you are. Whether you think you have flaws, or you don't feel pretty enough, or you don't feel you have the right grades, because oftentimes we label and perceive and judge ourselves. And so it's really, really important that you accept, own, and love who you are, flaws and all. Because I am telling you, I am far from perfect. And don't be afraid of it. And when I talk about realize, assess, and motivation, A stands for, you know, appraisals and assessment. If you see something about yourself you don't like, okay, so what? Let's think of it like a piece of real estate. You want to sell your house, the appraisal comes in low. What do? I don't know, remodel the bathroom maybe? Spruce up the pool, put in a new floor. These are things you can do for yourself. And the only thing holding you back is your own fear. So don't be afraid to give yourself an appraisal and go, you know what, I can change that. And when you do, you'll be even more empowered. See, I just did that. And what's so important is our motivations, and we lose it. We are living in some crazy times. But don't get so lost in the negativity and looking behind or what tomorrow will be, but rather get yourself centered and present for just a moment. And this is where the environment is instrumental, because when I am outside and I see everybody when they're outside on that beach, looking for the warmth, the sunshine, the sound of birds and hiking, and all of that engulfs you. This is a space where, believe it or not, where you're quiet and present, you can actually hear your voice. And so don't be in this whirlwind. Don't forget to stop and be present, so you can actually hear and tap in to who you are, and not try to be that person that everyone else thinks you should be. And you'll flow in and out of your journey, and you'll find that place. And it doesn't happen overnight. I go to water for this reason. We are water. We are water. But our brain, 83% water, lungs, 90-some%, the body, 70-some%. We are water. And when I go to water, what amazes me is its strength, and its resiliency, and its consistency. And what amazes me, when a river and a creek and a tributary come together, they create this magnificent force and waterfall, and they carve hills and valleys, and they can change a coastal landform. We are water. If you were lost, go there. Because if we are water, and that is water, you too have that strength, that resiliency, that fortitude, and you will carve some hills and valleys, but you may take off another direction, and that's okay. So find your strength again, being the water.
Erin, I am so inspired. It also takes us to a couple of the questions that we've been getting from people about water. Specifically in Wisconsin, it's a big issue. In Milwaukee, it's a big issue. And yet there are political issues, there are legislative issues, there are big money issues. And so can you tell us more about this fight and what you talk about in the book in terms of how Superman's not coming? So what are we supposed to do? Because there's lead pipes that need replacing. There's forever chemicals that will require big budget items. There's water, that needs to be cleaned and remediated. So tell more about this battle for water and what people do in their lives every day. And why is it that regulations aren't keeping our water safe? I think I'd probably be in the camp that thought, well, I'm sure there's, we have good government and they're protecting us, and it's something I turn on the faucet, it turns good, it looks pretty clear. It's not Flint, Michigan. So why should we be worried, and what should we do about it?
Well, when I hear, well, first of all, I have to catch myself and not go, the eye roll, because it's like, oh, it's too much. My brain hurts. And Suzanne, she'll bounce in and out of here with me, and I would really like her to, because we don't know what's going on, and we don't always want to believe what's going on. And even when we were doing this, I was talking to her and she's like, that's not going on. I'm like, yeah, well, maybe you should go find out. And I see her right over there. But where would I begin? We do have water problems. And in the book, we tried to share stories with you to help inspire you to know that you could too. And the first thing you need to do is just get curious and just understand and not assume that some agency, in fact, has your back, because oftentimes they don't. We do politicize things. Water shouldn't be one of them, but we do. And so there's a thing. It's politics. I can't get involved in politics. But by way of example, I want to share one story, because you mentioned lead. And because Flint is something that was recent enough and in our faces that we're like going, how could this happen in America? Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. And it was, again, the moms that stood up. Whatever and whoever we were and what we did back when to become the industrialized political world we are today worked then, it doesn't work today. Laws are antiquated. Our infrastructures are failing. They're hundreds of years old. And when you talk about lead, by the way, that's a policy, the lead and copper rule. See, who goes around thinking about the lead and copper rule? Actually, you really don't. I did, because I got involved in water and in Flint. But it is an antiquated policy that states you only have to test for lead in our municipal system once every 4 years. Imagine that. Once every 4 years, and you can average the samples. Talk about a way to miss a number and not find what you're looking for. So these are policies that we can reform. And then when you have something like Flint, now it's in the public eye. Somebody like Congressman Dan Kildee is going to come in and reform that policy, because how we are today and what our system is today is very different. And that old rule won't serve us moving forward. So there's a huge opening here for all of us, but for these next generations coming in to be involved with the policies and legislation and government and leadership and sciences and medicine and public health and welfare, and being a part of being more transparent. And the lead reminds me of the ladies of Hannibal, and I think it's a really important story. They came to me and they had lead levels in their distribution system in some locations higher than Flint. Wow. And they didn't understand why. So we went in, and I said earlier, knowledge is power, and educated them on why they were having this issue. Now, this issue in Hannibal is this nation's issue. The reason they had lead precipitating out into their water is because of the use of ammonia. So if I give you a water 101 class, water that comes into the municipality is generally surface water, rivers, creeks, and tributaries. And in water exists organic matter. And organic matter is dirt. I can't tell you how many times the community, when we start talking about organic matter, just like glosses over. But when you realize it's dirt, you can see them go, oh, I get that. But when we bring it in, because of the dirt, we chlorinate so we don't have outbreaks and we don't want E. coli and things like that. But what people don't know is that organic matter and chlorination create a very toxic compound called trihalomethanes, which are highly regulated by the Safe Drinking Water Act. Now, here's the point. This is a business model we've been using in this country for a long time, and it doesn't work, and it's got to change. And that business model is exactly the problem with adding ammonia and why they're adding the ammonia. They want to cheat the system, take a shortcut, saves money, and kicks the can down the line. So when you add ammonia to chlorination, you create another caustic chemical reaction in the water. And one of the things the ammonia does is sequester the effectiveness of chlorination. So now, when your chlorination isn't effective, you're seeing more and more Legionnaire outbreaks, and you are seeing more brain-eating amoebas, and you're also creating a caustic, corrosive water. And guess what that's doing? It's causing all the lead and the iron and the manganese inside our antiquated pipes to leach out into the distribution system and, unbeknownst to you, delivered to the tap. If we would change just that one thing and stop adding ammonia to the system, we would have less damage to an already damaged, antiquated, and failing infrastructure. We would have less lead outbreaks and contamination, less Legionnaire's disease, and less brain-eating amoebas. If we would do the right step on the upfront, not kick the can down the line. So this is what happened in Hannibal. Now, when these women, and here come the pissed off moms, they're like, oh, hell to the no. I am not having this. I'm not having my kid drink lead. What can we do? So we got them together, and they immediately started bringing in that collective, the community. They were getting the support of the community, the support of each other. They made it their job to learn about this. And so as the community was becoming more and more informed, the women were getting more empowered. They're like, what else can we do? So one of them, we said, hey, why don't you run for city council? Oh, I could never do that. Why could you not? You've stood up, you're using your voice, you understand what's going on. Well, guess what? She ran for city council and she won. Now, here's the thing. She's already educated the town. So they do a referendum. They get it out on the ballot to the people. The people need a seat at the table and a voice. They voted no more ammonia. They ended up getting into a litigation with the state. But long story short, I'm really happy to say to you that the town of Hannibal, Missouri no longer uses ammonia, and they have lead-free water. And that began with one mom that went to other moms, became the pissed off moms that got involved in local politics, wasn't afraid to do that, wasn't afraid to challenge themselves to understand ammonia, chlorination, how it got in the system. And every one of us can do that. And I've seen it play itself out. And so for me to write the book, to have a place where you too could read and go, oh, I could do that. Think about this. We're always waiting for what? Something magical from, I don't know where, the federal government, I don't know, the state that's going to come down here. It begins with you in your community, at your own local council. Think about if every municipality and every little council throughout America did exactly what the women of Hannibal did, and you lit that across the country, you'd make a hell of a change. And those are my dogs. Sorry about that. Stop.
And I just want to add on too that, you know, there are very well-meaning people who work at the EPA or who work at water treatment centers.
Yes, there are.
And these issues are too big for any one person. This is kind of the call of the book, is that we need communities to rise. We need to help each other. We can't assume one person is able to fix such a complicated system, right? The water is more toxic than it was 20 years ago. You know, these systems are complicated. The science is working its way to catch up to some of these laws, and in some cases the laws are not quite there. And this is why we wanted to give these stories of all these different people in communities and different entry points, right? Because not everybody is going to run for city council, but maybe someone is going to, you know, start to volunteer with their local water teachers, or, you know, show up to a city council meeting, make a friend there, and you're going to start some new project that's going to help your community. You know, these really are community issues.
How do you even know if your community has a water problem? Erin, you mentioned that the testing, what's mandated is once every 4 years, then they can average the results. They may not even be testing for some of the most dangerous chemicals.
Right.
I think people can act, they can get motivated when they know that there's a problem. How much of this goes undetected? And how can people find out more about the safety of the water in their own communities?
Well, to find out about, generally they always know. So it comes with an email to me, and they'll already see a hunch. But here's that moment that we keep talking about. They're like, ooh, do I really want to say something because I'm going to get yelled at by city council, or someone's going to call me crazy, or what if I'm right? What if our property values go down? So there comes this whole conversation where you're like, would I, should I, could I? They know already when they've emailed me. Usually they'll send a picture of dirty water, and they're like, and this is that common sense moment that I talk about. They'll go, my kid is, I turn around, they're bathing in black water.
Whoa.
Is there something wrong? Okay, let's stop right there. Let's go to what I call logic. This is one of my programs, Logic, Leverage, Loyalty, and Love. Logic, that's that moment for me in my common sense in Kansas. Okay, so when I'm outside playing and I can see thunderheads and the sky turns green and you can feel a change and the tornado sirens go off, see, that's that moment where you're in it, you see it, you need to own it. I'm not calling the Weather Channel to ask if it's an F4 or an F5 because I know something's wrong and I need to get to safety. And so by the time they've already come to me, that's that moment where they know it. They've got the dirty water. They've found out that their child was diagnosed with a disease, but they meet a mom at the local school. And unbeknownst to her, her child has the same disease. Then they kind of start talking around the neighborhood, and now they've got 4 or 5. They're like, what is this? So they know, but they need that little moment to go, am I on the right track? And I'm going to go, oh, hell yeah, you are. And that's where I talk about own what you're experiencing. So oftentimes they know that something's wrong. They'll sometimes get a notice in the paper, or I'll tell you what really gets them going. See, they know something's wrong. The water smells. The water came out yellow. There's specks of water, very subtle things, but enough that they're like, why is that? So they'll make a phone call to like the municipality, and they're like going, oh no, come on, you didn't see that. And see, that's that moment where they're like, wait a minute, no. And they keep going. So get curious, trust your instincts, and don't be afraid to get involved, and never assume here. And this is really important. Never assume, and assume that the city council may know. Have you ever been to a city council meeting? Because I bet you when you show up, there's no one in there. They're just talking to themselves. We have to show up. That's our duty. We have to show up. And when they do, that's when things will begin to change for them. So don't assume, and don't wait. Act, get curious. So what if you're wrong? All right, you were wrong. But what if you were right? Don't be afraid to talk to your neighbor. Engage yourself. Make it your business, because we do have water issues. We just started the whole conversation with that. I mean, really? So here you think the CDC would even inform all of us? So we've got millions of people that are being poisoned every year by water. What? We're America. We've got some real problems. And so don't assume, make it your job to know, get involved.
So Erin, you were in the news recently because I think you tweeted something sort of negative about one of the people in President-elect Biden's transition team. I wondered, how hopeful are you about changes in environmental regulations and oversight with the new administration?
Well, that was not a tweet.
Oh, okay.
that was an open letter, Dear Joe, in the Guardian, and I was upset.
Yeah.
Politics. I'm not towing a party line when it's wrong or when a decision is wrong. I was born and raised in Lawrence, Kansas, by a really staunch Republican family. Yet they're the very ones that taught me the value of water and land and family and health and welfare. This conversation is not an issue for one side of the aisle or the other. It's everybody's conversation. And I took it very personally and was very hopeful that this incoming administration would in fact make changes to water, to acknowledge that we have these water issues. If we don't even do that, we're going to continue to be on a 4-year trajectory of issues. And what bothered me in particular was that the incoming administration was looking at part of their transition team within the EPA, a gentleman by the name of Michael McCabe, who has been within the EPA before, has been very good in his job, by the way, but at one time left and ended up being a communication and strategic director of a very specific campaign with DuPont regarding PFAS. And in the Parkersburg, West Virginia, sorry, if you've seen the film Dark Waters that just came out with Mark Ruffalo, that is specifically about this town where DuPont dumped 7,100 tons of PFOA and destroyed 100,000 people, their life and their water. And Michael McCabe, who's now being considered part of this new transition team within the EPA, is the very one that strategically worked with DuPont so they didn't have to clean up and face regulations. I'm like, I'm sorry. I cannot do that. And just because I call it out doesn't mean I don't have hope. It doesn't mean that I'm against you, but it does mean I want to remind you of something that happened and the hope and the promises that I took literally from this campaign that you will do something about the environment. We're getting off to a bad start. And that's why I wrote the letter. And we, again, all of us need to be responsible, even within our own parties. When we see this, say something.
And Biden's team has said that they want to take action on PFAS, but then at the same time have someone from DuPont on the transition team. So it's feel that, you know, as a journalist, it's our job to call out these things. This is why we have the media. You know, and someone was asking earlier too, just how to get involved, you know, watching the news, reading your local paper, you can find out a lot about your community. You know, one of the people that we feature in the book, Jerry Ensminger, who's a veteran, he learned about the contamination at Camp Lejeune because he was watching the nightly news. And he realized his daughter's leukemia, she died at the age of 8 at Camp Lejeune, you know, was based on this whole contamination that had been covered up. So, you know, there is hope for people who have been through situations that have been covered up. The truth always comes out. It always comes out. And this administration, yeah, exactly. We have hope, but we also are going to continue to keep them on task and let them, you know, we don't have time for this administration or any other one to be lollygagging on any of this stuff.
Well, and the PFOA and the PFOS is the biggest national water contamination we have in this country, in our history. Yes, and you have these problems in Wisconsin. And part of the problem here is, and to kind of give you an idea of how something works in regards to a chemical inside the EPA. The EPA was notified in 1960s, late 60s, that this chemical was going to be a problem, and that they were already seeing in 1961 liver cancer in rabbits and dogs from this chemical. So here's where we need to make changes within our administrations, and in my opinion, the EPA, where things are getting run ass backwards, and we're really going to have to change this. So the EPA is so notified, and what they do is set a guideline. So I'm not sure where the guideline came from because the science wasn't in. They hadn't even done the science yet, but they set a guideline of this chemical in the environment and through the municipalities. You could run up to 400 parts per trillion. So off we go, and that's what the municipalities do. They're following that guideline. So then the EPA has to commission a study, and these studies cost millions and millions of dollars. And these studies take a long time. They take 10, 12, 15, 18 years. Well, as the studies finally came in 2016, they had to tell the EPA, we have a problem. This causes cancer and diseases. It causes testicular cancer. It causes thyroid cancer. It causes kidney disease, liver disease, infertility, high blood pressure. So the EPA is like, this at this point is where I'm like going, first of all, why are we even putting a chemical into the marketplace where we have no idea what the impact's going to be, but we're told by the manufacturer is going to be a problem? What we need to be doing is studies on the upfront. You're going to show me first what that chemical does in the water before I ever let you put it into the system. So I'm like, what could we be thinking? Well, from this point, the EPA sets a new guideline of 70 parts per trillion. And what happens? Every municipality in America, and there's tens of thousands of them, is going, wait a minute, we don't have the budget to bring it down to that level. What are we going to do? Then I get the community calls. Is this why my son has testicular cancer? Is this why my daughter has thyroid disease? Is this why I lost my wife to kidney cancer? I mean, it's like Jerry Ensminger that very moment going, oh my God, how did this happen? And so what we need to do is not hide these studies and not, this is where I've said before, we got to change a model of how we're doing things and not kicking a can down the road because it is not working out for us. This is a really very dangerous chemical. And so back to our original point and why I wrote that piece was this can't happen again. And if I hear or see that you either A, don't know something about this chemical or the extent of it, I really feel it's my duty and my obligation to say something. And so we've got to change courses. There's a moment, and you said it earlier, Mary, with science and politics, all of that is kind of finally colliding. And this is a moment I've been waiting for forever. Transparency and changing our policies and reforming what we need to so we can move forward as a better, more sustainable future world.
Erin, so with people who are watching and might be interested in how they can support making sure that these voices are heard in places like Washington, obviously voting is first and foremost. There are a lot of powerful forces that are against those types of studies, even having them done, and certainly forcing against action being taken. Who are the good guys? Who are the organizations that are getting in these fights, whether it's on the national or local basis, that offset some of the other large players that might be working against this type of policies and regulation?
Well, there's so many great groups out there. I mean, one that immediately comes to mind has been Environmental Working Group in Washington, D.C. And they have scientists and lawyers, and they get up there and they lobby and they fight for it and they put the information out there. And that's oftentimes what needs to happen is the information isn't out there and how people can access it. And again, that is at an EPA level. And to this point, we're coming local and coming up from there makes a change. While the EPA may have a level now, a guideline for this chemical PFOA, which you would know as Teflon, and PFOS, which is a part of the same family of chemicals, which would be known as firefighting foam, Scotchgard. I mean, this chemical is in everything we touch. I was very, very disturbed about a Harvard researcher who done some work that because all of us have this PFAS chemical in our body, some studies were showing that it would cause less efficacy on the COVID vaccine. I'm like, okay, see, what are we possibly thinking? So we need to find ways to clean it up. But what the states are doing is they're coming down to lower numbers. So while the federal guideline is 70 parts per trillion on this chemical, New Jersey, by way of example, has come down to 10 and 11 parts per trillion because they've said, no, there's too much and that's too high, and we're going to set our level. And now the CDC is coming down even lower, and I've seen city councils get involved, and we're in a huge Chrome 6 fight where they're like, and they have a lot of say as well, no, we want that lower. So you can, if you find out about this chemical, don't always start at the top. You can call all your senators and congressmen, but you can act locally as well. The ladies of Hannibal and changing the lead situation. In Carson, California, we had a big Shell oil contamination. They got the cleanup order, not from the federal government or the state, from their local city council. And so don't forget that you can do that. So you can always call congressmen and women and senators. Again, back to stick-to-itiveness, those mothers who make it their job to make those phone calls and rotate and go in and out and never give up, they actually get seen and heard. But don't forget to go knocking right in your own backyard. Hello, City Council, do you know what's happening over here? Or Board of Supervisors. And they can make changes.
So Erin, a question locally, talking about locally, and we certainly have one of the sponsor, the School of Freshwater Science. What role do the research organizations can play in terms of helping increase that awareness or advocating?
Oh my gosh, so much. I mean, because they can get funding and grants, and they can get testing, and they can get studies. They get out in the communities. So even, I'm down in Florida a lot, and we have the toxic algae blooms. The fishermen and the organizations that they have created, find your local river keeper. But at the universities, oh my gosh, because they can get grants and funding and do studies. Just had this conversation in Iowa where they have a bunch of PFOA in somebody's well, and it's affected the aquifer. So they can't use the well, they can't drill a new one, but the University of Iowa came in and they had the grant and the funding through programs to actually do the studies to get the tests that showed, this is a problem. So, and we list so many different, and I know Suzanne might want to say a few, but we list and put a lot of those in the book so you have that place to go to. But they make an incredible difference with their work and with their organization. And, down in Florida, I mean, because they're locals and they're the local fishermen and they know the local people and they know an organization, they are real big supports in and around the community. And then they can get grants, they get testing and studying to. This is something interesting I want to say about the science. Oftentimes it could be missing because we have these data sets all over the place. And I had a conversation with a scientist on the radio, and he said, well, let's be honest, Erin, you don't have all the data. You're right, I don't. I have never have a problem telling you, you're right, I don't. But here's something I wanted him to remember. You're the scientist. He said, you don't have the data to conclude it can hurt people. You're right, I don't. But as a scientist, you don't have the data points either to conclude that it doesn't. And so when these other organizations come in and they can do testing or those science, it helps us give us those data sets and that information to better protect people. And something is here. And I think we forget how important those missing data sets are that could exist right underneath your own nose. And in Hinckley, one of the missing data sets was the well water readings that the county health department had. And once we found that number, it changed everything.
Yeah.
And Suzanne has some groups I know that she
Well, I'll just say on my wish list in terms of research is just more studies that show the impact of these toxins on the human body and the impact of multiple chemical toxic load on the human body. Because once those studies are in there, you know, we can set those levels and we can bring down these toxins in the environment. But you know, so much of it is still unknown, and the studies that we do have are amazing, but I'd love to see more. And also, yeah, just a couple of other organizations, NRDC, the National Resource Defense
Yep.
Council, is doing wonderful work.
Okay.
Union of Concerned Scientists is doing wonderful
Yep.
work. And, you know, again, it doesn't necessarily, you know, you can support these organizations by giving them money or sign up for their newsletter, and then you start to get involved, you start to learn more about these issues. So anyone who's looking for an entry point, you know, a newsletter is a great way to just start to get involved, whether it's a local organization or a national.
Thanks, Suzanne. And thank you, everyone, for coming. And Erin, just turning over to you. Final words can you leave us with?
Well, like I said, water and the journey is never a soundbite. It's always a story. And I angst, you know, it's like, because sometimes it's very daunting. So my joke always is, see, this is why nobody invites me to parties, because they'll ask me about water and then it becomes an hour-long story and they're like, oh, so don't bring her again. But I am hopeful. And a couple of things really stick to my mind I want to share with you. Who's been missing in this game is us. Because I'm afraid we've lost ourselves, and we've lost that voice that can help us find ourselves and our courage and our heart and that kind of passion. And we, for a long time, maybe assumed that something would come save us, and they're not, because we can save ourselves. And we're all going through something right now, and with COVID, and we have been put on a stop. I've always said, we've been spinning out of control, and that moment something stops. And I've always asked people, stop, take a breath, reconnect, hear yourself. We're there right now. And I find this as horrific and daunting and fearful as it has been. In this moment, we are finding ourselves. We will get back to we the people. We will understand and enjoy and appreciate our environment. So I have great, great hope. And with that, there's two things from the book that I want to share in closing. And it's food for thought, if you will, but at the same time, it's to my point. So I'm going to read you a quote, one of my favorite. Man's attitude toward nature is today critically important simply because we have now acquired a fateful power to alter and destroy nature. But man is a part of nature, and his war against nature is inevitably a war against himself. We're challenged as mankind has never been challenged before to prove our maturity and our mastery, not of nature, but of ourselves. That was written by Rachel Carson in 1963. And to think in the 60s, the Cuyahoga River was on fire, and we are still having this conversation in 2020, makes me really look at this and think we've got to not control and alter and destroy nature, but rather this is a moment where we must turn into ourselves, who we are, what we believe, what we protect and preserve. That will make the ultimate difference. And so the last two paragraphs of the book is something I'd like to leave you with, and it kind of covers everything we've talked about today. So water. And we know what a gift it is. And I think we are all starting to understand with climate change, which is going to be a water event, we're going to have too many flooding. We've got droughts. We've got fire. We're losing aquifers. We're losing our water. We don't have enough water. It's too polluted. That the issue is here. Now imagine for a moment that all of what we've talked about was gone for good. We can't live without our natural resources, our water, our air, and our soil. What would happen if that very livelihood and the most necessary element to sustain life were too polluted or simply vanished? I know some people think this scenario could never happen. The message of this book is clear. We are in trouble, and we need to be the ones. We need to be the ones to save our water and in turn, ourselves. Now is not the time to fight one another. It's a time to come together for our greater good. I have seen too much waste, selfishness, greed, hidden agendas, and finger pointing. Sharing information and working together is our only hope. The solution lies with people in their communities and at the local and state level, working for change throughout our great nation and doing it together. We don't need to wait for anyone else to come and save us. We can start small, start in our own neighborhoods, and work to make significant changes that will impact generations to come. I've been inspired to devote my life to this work, and I hope that you will join me. After all, this is our planet that we all call home. And I have seen repeatedly, when we join forces, we can't be stopped.
Thank you, Erin, so much. Perfect way to end. Daniel, handing it back over to you.
Thank you both, thank all three of you for an amazing event.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.